Hi, my name is John Ryder. I'm the General Manager of Sage 100 Enhancements for DSD Business Systems. And in this video, we will be covering the features of the DSD ScanForce multi-bin. Joining me is Ashley Berger, who will be giving a demonstration of the product. The DSD ScanForce multi-bin addresses these business needs. Companies that do distribution or manufacturing can have multiple warehouses, and each warehouse can have different configurations related to bin locations. The DSD ScanForce multi-bin adds functionality so that you can enable multi-bin within each warehouse and define smart bin numbers that include segments for aisles, zones, and bin locations. Allocation and auto allocation is pivotal for this product in that you can allocate receipt of goods to bin locations as well as lot serial. For a sales order, you can distribute from bin locations, and you have the manual and auto allocation capability. With DSD ScanForce Multi-Bin Advanced, you have the additional feature of auto allocation and replenishment, and it integrates with ScanForce Warehouse Management. The key features of the product include defining multi-bin by warehouse, company, product line, and item. You also have bin restrictions that you can apply. Auto allocation and manual allocation are available in the data entries that involve inventory. And in the multi-bin ScanForce module, you can view item availability in different bin locations, and you can define bin location availability by item. You also have the ability of doing quick bin transfer within a warehouse. You have auto allocation capabilities that can be defined for each data entry in a warehouse. And you have the additional capability of doing replenishment where you can move items from one bin to multiple bins. Finally, with the advanced product, you have advanced picking sheet printing where you can auto allocate to bin locations while you print the picking sheets. In this video, we'll be covering the following features. First, we'll discuss the multi-bin module and the menu items that are in the module. We'll discuss item maintenance and how you can drill down into item bin maintenance. We'll discuss bin location maintenance, and then allocations and purchase order receipts, sales orders, and invoices. These are covered in the multi-bin basic features of the product. For the advanced features, we have warehouse bin auto allocation, and then auto allocation in the following data entries: PO receipts, production management, production entry, and then we'll be covering the advanced features in picking sheet, printing, and replenishment. We will also be covering the setup of the multi-bin module, which includes multi-bin options for both basic and advanced. We'll discuss enabling multi-bin by warehouse. Then we'll cover bin creation, then product line maintenance, location type maintenance, and finally, how to auto-generate bin locations. We'll start the demo video now.
The DSD ScanForce Multi-Bin Advanced is a new module added to Sage 100. When I select this module, you'll see the typical submenus that you see in other modules. So you have a main submenu, we have reports, we have setup, and we have utilities, and we have explore. So under the main menu, we have the following menu items. Have bin location maintenance. This is where you define your bin locations, and from here you can also see that items are inside each bin, as well as the data entries that are in play for that bin location. The next menu option is item bin maintenance. This is where you can look at an item by warehouse to see what bin locations that item is in, as well as the data entries that are in process for that item in warehouse. The next four menu options are for the advanced feature of multi-bin, and this is replenishment. This is where you can do a bulk transfer of items from one bin to other bins using the replenishment selection, and we'll go over that menu option shortly. Under reports, we have a bin location listing that shows the bin locations. We have an item listing that shows the items, what bins they're in. We have a bin location stock status report that shows the bin locations and their quantities that are on hand. We have a bin location allocation report. This report shows the data entries that have the items in the bins. And then finally, we have the bin location transaction history report, which shows a history of items that have gone into bins or have been sold from bins. Under the setup, we have multi-bin options. This is where you can enable multi-bin by company and do the settings for the company code. We have location type maintenance. This is where you can define areas in a warehouse that can be applied to specific bin locations. Warehouse bin maintenance. This is where you can enable multi-bin by warehouse. There are some additional settings there, and you also have the auto allocation rules for the advanced product. We have segment code maintenance. This is for the smart bin locations. And then we have product line bin maintenance, where you can enable or disable multi-bin by product line. We have a number of utilities. We have auto-generate bin locations. This is where you can define one bin location and bin location maintenance, and then from there, that bin location can create multiple bin locations. And then we have some recalculation utilities. That's the menu options that we have in multi-bin. So the majority of the enhancements are in this module, but we do have integrations throughout Sage 100 in the distribution modules and manufacturing modules. What I want to do now is to take you directly into inventory maintenance, where you can see that integration. So in item maintenance, I'm going to choose an item code. And from here in Standard Sage, you can see the warehouses and the quantities that are on hand on a purchase order, on a sales order, and so on. From here, you can just double click and go directly into the warehouse in the multi-bin module. So now here I'm in item bin maintenance, right? So if I go back to the bin menu, item bin maintenance was the second option on the main menu. So you can drill down from inventory maintenance right into the item bin maintenance. This will show you more detail as to where in the warehouse this item is located. So you can see here my item for warehouse 001, it has the following bin locations that have a quantity on hand. So from here you can see what's on hand, and you can also see details on which data entry have that item and bin in process. So for example, this bin, you can see we have a quantity of 970, and we have 14 in inventory or sales order, and then we have 2 in replenishment, and it shows the availability. So from here, you could also drill down from item bin maintenance into the bin location. So I'm going to drill down onto this first bin location, and now it takes you directly into bin location maintenance, which is going back to our menu, is the first menu item on the main menu. Now we have a view of the bin location, and we can see the items that are currently in the bin. This is a dual view where you can see in bin location maintenance the items that are in the bin. And if I flip back to item bin maintenance, you can see for this item what bin locations it's in. So let's talk about bin location maintenance for a moment. As mentioned, you can create multiple bin locations within a warehouse. On the main tab here, you can see that we have statements that make up the bin location. And then we can have a sort method, and you can set that so when you're printing reports or picking sheets, you can have the lines display in a bin location sort order. We also have a checkbox for active, so you can have a warehouse be deactivated for that bin location, and we have a location type. I will discuss that in a moment, the location type maintenance and how that works with the bin locations. And then you have a minimum and maximum quantity. So typically for bin locations, there's a maximum quantity for all items. So here is where you can define. In this example, I'll set the maximum quantity to 1,000. That I can put in the bin location for all items. On the screen, it also shows us the last time the item was, or any item was received into this bin location, the last time it was issued, sold, and counted. You can also have restrictions on a bin location. On the second tab here, I can see there are restrictions by data entry, so you may want to have some bin locations that are reserved for receiving, but you cannot sell from that bin location. For example, you may want to have a receiving bin location in your warehouse where you can only receive to that bin location, and then from there you can only transfer from that receiving bin in other bin locations. There's also on the right side item restrictions, so you can define a bin location to only allow receipt for a specific item code or a specific product line. We also have the same item, and that is you can receive an item into your bin. If the bin is empty, and then once you've put that item into the bin, you can only receive that item code into that bin until the bin is empty. We have that same feature for product line. Finally, we have a product line UDF that you can define and say that only that product line that have the user defined field can be set allowed for receiving to that bin. We also have customer order restriction, and that is for the sales side. You can have a bin location that is customer specific. For example, you have a large customer like Walmart and you have a section of bins in your warehouse. This is just set aside for that customer. You can say for this customer, and of course the next is customer sort. So you can set up the sort field in the customer maintenance. You can set a sort field and then use that sort field here to restrict for that specific customer sort. We also have for customer type, and then finally we have sales order specific. This is where you can define a bin location so you only allowed for sales for specific sales order. This is good if you are doing staging by sales orders. You can have a bin location for a large sales order that you fill up the items until the order is ready to ship. You can restrict it to only be for that sales order. A salesperson cannot select for that bin location for another sales order. Next, we have the Items tab. This is where you can define a minimum and maximum quantity by item for that bin location. Since items are arranged in sizes, you may have a situation where you can only fit 5 of a single item into a bin, but another you can fit 1,000 of them. Next, we have the 3 panels that show quantities. We have quantity, transactions, and allocations. The quantity tab shows the items that are in the bin. Transactions are the history. It shows any specific activity in that bin location, and you can choose on the right side the binoculars button to filter a date range. On this panel, it shows the date of the transactions, the transaction type, and then there's a reference number that shows you the invoice on the receipt of goods that you can use this bin location for. Finally, it shows the quantity, user, and if you have ScanForce, it has the handheld user code. Finally, the Allocations tab. This shows a detailed representation of all the data entries that have the item and bin location. If you're on the Quantity tab and you see that there are items on sales orders, you can go to the Allocations tab and see which sales orders make up those quantities. Now, when we go back to Item Bin Maintenance, you'll see that Item Bin Maintenance has the same quantity, transactions, and allocations tab. Again, in bin location maintenance, the quantities tab shows the items that are in the bin location, and the item bin maintenance shows the bin locations that have that item. So the 2 tabs on the quantity tab on each screen is identical, as well as the transactions and allocations. One of the other features in bin location maintenance and item bin maintenance is the ability to do quick transfer. On the Quantity tab, you can select a bin location, and then on the top right corner, there's a transfer button where I can transfer quantities for this bin location to another bin location within the same warehouse. Here, it shows the available quantities, so I can transfer. Then, here I can choose another bin location to transfer to. Here I'm going to select a quantity of 10 to transfer from one bin to another. Then, on the Transactions tab, we'll see here is what we can see, the quick transfer that just occurred where I moved a quantity of 10. This quick transferability is also available in bin location maintenance. Receipt of goods for multi-bin. I'm going to go ahead and enter a receipt number. So I already have a purchase order entered. You can make it an invoice or not, it doesn't matter. And then when we go into lines, you can receive it or not receive it, but you can see that I have multiple things set up. So for the sake of examples, I have a regular item. It's not enabled for multi-bin. I have a regular item that is enabled for multi-bin. I have a serial that's not enabled for multi-bin. I have a serial item that is enabled for multi-bin, and same with the lots, no multi-bin and multi-bin. So we'll go through. So you'll see for the regular item with no multi-bin enabled, there is no warning box because I don't have to distribute anywhere and I don't have to add a lot or serial number to it. But my next one for the regular item, since it is multi-bin enabled, I have to add a bin location. So this is what your bin location distribution screen looks like. So if you go ahead and open up, you have all your bin locations here. You have a shipping bin, you could have a receiving bin, or there's default bins that you would want to, so we can just say we're at the receiving dock and we just want to receive this in, and we're received 5. So you see the triangle goes away, and then you have the serial numbers. So this is standard Sage, so you have your serial number list. Again, no multi-bin is enabled, so you don't have any multi-bin screens that you have to go through. Just going to add a serial number here. And we're going to distribute all those. So my warning sign goes away on that. So then my next one is serial number with multi-bin installed. So if I go ahead and distribute that, you'll see that I have a bin location and a serial number. So I select bin location, so I can go ahead again and I can choose my receiving. And again, I have my serial number, so I can add my serial number. So I want it to start at 1. Go ahead and add those, and then it's all going to distribute throughout the receiving and 1 to each number. Go ahead and accept that. So that's my serial number. So if I go to lot, this one's no multi-bin enabled, so you will not see the bin location, so you just have to add a lot number. So we can just say August of 25, distribute the 15, and I'm good. The lot with multi-bin enabled, you'll see that there is a bin location, so you can go ahead and, like we've been doing for the others, choose that receiving dock. And go again, we can do August 25th. It's our second lot of the August 25th, so I'll just do the -2 and go ahead and accept that entry as well. So those are all of the different examples of multi-bin. There are auto allocation features that come with our multi-bin advanced. The sales order entry, I have the option of assigning bin locations to the items on the sales order. This is not mandatory selection, but it is useful if you want to assign bin locations at the sales order level that will then flow through into invoice data entry. You can see when I enter the quantity order, there's the yellow warning tag that says you do auto allocations to bins, but again, it's not mandatory in sales order entry. Here I can manually select the bin distribution button, and here you'll see that I can choose the bin locations. So I have to look up a bin location maintenance and it will show you what bins that item exists in. I can choose from multiple bins. You can see here that there is a receiving bin that has the item, but the bin is restricted for sales order entry. It's only allowing for receiving, therefore I cannot use that bin location. Here you can see I'm allocating multiple bins to one line item. When I invoice the sales order, those bin location selections will be transferred from the sales order to the invoice. For lot serial items, there's an additional feature in the selection. When you select the distribution, you see here that I have to allocate both the bin location as well as the lot number. Here's where the distribution order option is enabled, so I can choose the data entry to do the bin location first, or I can select lot serial first. If I choose the lot serial first, it displays the lot serial numbers and the bin locations, and when I choose that specific lot number, it'll auto-populate the bin location for that lookup. So you can see here it's chosen the lot number and the bin location. In invoice data entry, you have the same feature of allocating items in bin locations. In sales order entry, the allocations of bins is not required. However, in invoice entry, it is required. You must select the bin locations that you are shipping from in order to complete the line item of the invoice. So in this example, I'm going to select the item code, and when I go to the next line, you can see it automatically pops up the bin location distribution. From here, I can choose the bin location I'm going to be shipping from. If you choose a bin location that has restrictions, it is going to display. So for example, invoice transactions are not allowed from the receiving bin location. So I will choose a different bin location that allows for that entry. Once you've distributed to the bins, then you can select OK, and now you can see that the warning message on the line has disappeared. For lot serial items, you have the same feature mentioned in sales order entry where you distribute is from the bin location and the lot number or serial number. I can choose the distribution order or lot serial first or bin location first. If I choose the lot serial, when I choose the from, it will look up the serial number. It'll automatically select the bin location for me. There are auto allocation capabilities with the advanced product. Next, we're going to go into warehouse bin maintenance. You can define in a warehouse if multi-bin's enabled or not. What I'm going to go over next is the auto allocation features that you can set up for each warehouse. So I'm going to choose warehouse 001, and on the allocations tab, you can see there's a grid that displays the auto allocation settings by data entry. You can define for each data entry how you want to auto allocate and how you're prompted to auto allocate. When you look at the data entries, there's two categories. There's inbound and then there's outbound. So inbound is any data entry where you're putting items into a bin location. So that could be PO receipts, it could be sales order, credit memos, RMA, returns. It could be a replenishment or a put away. That's inbound. Outbound, obviously, is you're taking items out of a bin. So that could be sales order, it could be an invoice, it could be an inventory sale, or it could be a production management material issue. In this company, I don't have manufacturing turned on. Production management or real materials. There are going to be grayed out. So what I want to start with first is the auto allocation method, and I'll start with inbound. So PO receipts is an inbound auto allocation. And when you're doing an auto allocation, what that means is the system is going to decide for you what bins it's going to auto allocate. So I should point out that the auto allocation methods are different between inbound and outbound. So inbound, these are the following auto allocation methods. You can disable it. So that means you have to manually allocate. Then there's default bin location, and the default bin location uses what's on the left. So an example of using a default bin location for receiving is that if you're receiving inventory into your warehouse rather than putting it into the specific bins right away, you may want to stage it. So you may want to just put it into a receiving area or a receiving bin location. And then from there you can do put away through replenishment. The benefit of this is that you're getting that inventory into your warehouse, so that's, it's going to be available. Here is when you can define the default bin location. And so in this example, all receipts will automatically go to that location. The next most common option is item receiving bin. Item bin maintenance, so you can define up to 5 receiving bins. So I'm going to go ahead and choose item bin maintenance, and I'm going to select this item here, and you can see that I have set up the default receiving bin location. So you have up to 5, and then you also have overstock. So this will auto allocate method. What it does is it first looks into bin location 1 and puts the item into the bin location up to the point that it's filled the maximum quantity for that bin location. Once it's filled up, then it uses bin location 2, then 3, then 4, then 5. And then finally, it puts it in the overstock. And as mentioned earlier, you can define the maximum quantity for a bin location in bin location maintenance. This one is one of the most common auto allocation methods for receiving because you want to automatically put it into the bins that are set up for that item code. The other allocation methods is we have last bin location. And what that means is whatever the last bin location that item was put into, it's going to use that bin location. Then we have current item bin location. This is the bin that has the most quantity of that specific item. Then there is the overstock bin. This is probably the least used one. So we're just putting everything in the overstock bin, and then from there I may want to move it from the overstock bin to the items receiving bin, maybe using put away. So those are the auto allocation methods that you have for inbound auto allocation. As mentioned, the outbound auto allocation methods, there's different and we actually have more choices. So I'm going to go ahead and look at sales order invoices, and as mentioned, there's a lot more choices you can choose. You have default bin location, which again, like the receiving, you pick the default bin location here and you may want to have it come from shipping. This is a good auto allocation method if you are using staging areas. So if you're preparing your shipment, if you just move everything to that shipment area and then it's ready for you to be shipped, then you can have it automatically put from the shipping area rather than the other bin locations. The most common one is the item picking bin. So you're going back to item bin maintenance where I showed you the default receiving bins. You have up to 5. You also have the same thing for picking bins. Right, so this is for outbound. So again, it chooses this bin location first, then 2 through 5, and then it will pull from overstock. So that's item picking bin. The other options you have is item picking bin oldest outbound. So it looks at the item picking bin, but it also chooses which bin location was the bin that you received in. Oldest, right? The oldest inbound date. You have bin location order that just does alphabetical bin locations. That's probably one of the least used auto allocation methods for outbound. You have descending quantity and ascending quantity. This is choosing the bin that has the most quantity in it versus the bin that has the least amount. So the least amount, you may want to choose that because you want to empty that bin out. Bins have the fewest amounts, then you have the oldest inbound date, which is the bin location that received in that bin location as the oldest date. We have the last inbound date, which you choose the bin that receives in that item at the earliest date. And then the last two are the closest match. So the closest match means you're looking for a bin location that has the quantity that has the most of that quantity that you are shipping. So for example, if you have 2 bin locations, one with 5 and one with 3, and you're shipping 5, it's going to choose the one that has 5 in it rather than choosing the one that has 3 and then taking 2 from the other one. So this maximizes the productivity of your picker. And then finally, we have closest matched oldest inbound date. So if you have 2 bin locations that have, in my example, quantity of 5, it'll choose the bin that has the oldest inbound date. So these are the auto allocation methods for inbound and outbound. And again, you can choose which ones you want to use by the data entry. In the next column, we have the lot serial auto allocation in here. This is for the lot serial items, which auto allocation you want to choose. And this is really for outbound, right? Inbound, it's disabled because we have to choose the lot serial that you're creating. So you really can't do auto allocation method for that. For outbound, you have these options, so you can disable it so that it requires that you always put in the bin location manually. You have the oldest receipt date, and that's the receipt date for when you receive it in through purchase order or inventory. You can do it lot serial number, alphabetical. You can just do it in bin location order. You also have oldest inbound and last inbound, and then finally maybe the one more commonly used is use expiration date. So if you enabled expiration dates for lot serial items in standard Sage 100, you do use the expiration dates assigned. If it is a perishable good, then you'll choose based on the oldest expiration date. So here I'm going to go ahead and set mine to be the receipt date. Alright, the next column is the option, which is when under the circumstances does it auto allocate, and there's these options. Here are 4. The first is auto allocate, and what that means is it will always auto allocate for without prompting you or if you press a button. For example, invoice the sales order, and then when it goes to lines and you hit ship complete, it will automatically allocate to the bin locations for you. And you could also set it to not allocate, or you're going to have it prompt. So in my example, when you're invoicing a sales order, when you go to lines and you say yes to ship complete, it will then prompt you to auto allocate, and you can say yes or no. And finally, there's button selection. So in the bin distribution panel, you can select a button to do the auto allocate. And this is where maybe you want to manually allocate to some bins, and then auto allocate the rest. The last column is default to prior row, and this is the bin allocation panel. When you do multiple allocations, it'll default the bin location from the prior row, or it'll default the lot serial number from the prior row. And we'll talk about that more when we do PO receipted goods. That's it for the auto allocation methods and warehouse bin maintenance. In purchase order entry, I'm going to create a PO. There's no bin allocation required in purchase order entry that occurs during the receipt of goods. So I'm going to select one that is a non-lot serial. I'm going to choose one that is a lot item, and I'm going to choose one that is a serial number. Now I'm going to create a receipt of goods for that purchase order. When I go to lines, it's going to prompt me if I want to receive complete. I'm going to go ahead and say yes here. It's also prompting me if I want to auto allocate the bins. That's because in warehouse bin maintenance, I had the option set to have it prompt me to do the auto allocation. There's also a setting to auto allocate, which means I can just allocate automatically without prompting me. I'm going to go ahead and say yes, so you can see the first item, there's no warning button, and that's because it automatically allocated to the bin location, and that's where it's a non-lot serial number. You can see here it automatically chooses the receiving bin to receive into. For lot serial, because I have to select the lot number I'm receiving or the serial number I'm receiving, I do have to manually enter here. That's it for receipted goods. Next, we're going to go over the auto allocation and invoice data entry. As mentioned in warehouse bin maintenance, you can select the auto allocation method. For this data entry, I've chosen to use the item picking bin. Here, I'm going to select a regular item that's not lot serial. You can see when I select the quantity order that the warning message has come up at the beginning of the line. When I tap through it, you can see that the warning message has gone away because it automatically allocated to the bin location based on the warehouse bin maintenance rules. If I go back and look at the item, I can see here that it shows the bin location that's set up for the item in the warehouse. So it automatically choosing the bin location. Of course, I can delete that item and I can allocate from a different bin location. I'm going to choose a lot number. As I go through the line, you can see it automatically allocated the lot or serial number and the associated bin location for me. If I go back and look, you can see here it shows this lot number in the bin location based on the auto allocation rules set up in bin location maintenance. If I choose a serial number, you can see that the auto allocation occurred. It automatically selected. That concludes the auto allocation feature in sales order. We're going to go over manufacturing. In manufacturing, we have the multi-bin capabilities and the production management module. As mentioned in other modules, you have the ability to define auto allocation rules. In warehouse bin maintenance, if you have the multi-bin advanced product, when I select warehouse bin maintenance and I select a warehouse on the allocations tab, towards the bottom I have data entries for PM completions and PM material issues. For completions, when you run a completion, it'll automatically create or auto-allocate the completion item into the appropriate bins that's selected here. For material issues, whether it's through transaction entry or through auto issue, I can choose the auto-allocation method for that. For completions, in this example, I have it set to put completions items into the item receiving bin, and for materials, I'm pulling from the items picking bin. Let's see where this happens in production management. If you do a work ticket entry and you have a work ticket that you want to assign the materials issue method to backflush, then the completion that creates the transaction entry for the material issue, I'll use the auto allocation method as mentioned for material issues. If you have an issue method of auto issue, then when you release this work ticket, the auto allocation will occur when it creates the transaction entry for the material issue. Manual allows you to do the work ticket transaction entry for material issue. We're going to look at the transaction entry and we're going to look at the feature for multi-bin selection. Here I'm going to do a material issue. I'm going to select my work ticket and I'm going to choose an item that I'm going to issue to that work ticket. I'm going to choose the item and the step number and the quantity issued. You can see here that there is a warning message that's pointing out a bin must be allocated because I have auto allocation enabled for this. Data entry, you can see the warning message has gone away, and then when you select the bin distributions, you can see that it has already selected the bin location for me to issue from. Of course, you can delete the entry and you choose another bin location that has the item in it. That's it for material issue. For completion entry, you have the same auto allocation and manual entry capabilities for bin distribution. If I'm going to be completing an item for a work ticket, it does require that I select the bin location that I'm putting them into. Here I'm going to choose a specific bin location to receive into once the completion has been processed. And that concludes the manufacturing part. I'm also going to be going over bill of materials. If you're using the bill of material module for production entry and disassembly, we have the multi-bin features in that module. If I select the bill of material module, and I will go into production entry and create a production entry. There's a new button that's distributed, and here is where I select the bin location that I'm putting the item into. There are auto allocation capabilities for this data entry as well. Now that I've distributed that bin that I'm putting the product item into the line items, I also have bin allocation for those components that I'm pulling from bin locations. You can see here that there are components that have the warning message that's telling me I need to distribute in order to complete the production entry. I'll select the first line and choose the bin location button, where I can choose the bin locations to pull from. After I choose the bin location, the warning message will disappear. There are auto allocation rules you can set up for a warehouse for production and to have an auto allocate or auto distribute for these components. As mentioned, you can do auto allocation or manual allocations in sales order entry. Then when you invoice the sales order, the bin locations you've chosen on the sales order will flow through to the invoice. But there may be a situation where you want to choose the bin locations at the picking sheet time. So here in picking sheet printing, we have a multi-bin button where it allows me to auto allocate. Now if I choose to auto allocate here, what happens is when I print the pick sheet, before it actually prints, it'll first auto allocate to the sales order. And then it will print the picking sheets for the sales order, and the picking sheet will show the bin locations that are auto allocated to. This allows your picking person to go directly to those bin locations. When doing the picking rather than looking through the warehouse of available quantities, there may be situations where it cannot auto allocate from the picking sheet printing. So if that situation, the picking sheet will just have a blank line so the picker can fill it in. The bin location that they pick from, and then you can also choose here to print unallocated quantities on the pick sheet. There's also available field checkbox, and what that will allow is for the picking sheet to show bin locations that have that item. So therefore the picker can then go get them. Those bin locations directly and choose which bin they want to pull from. We have a checkbox that says exclude sales orders and shipping entry. Printing a pick sheet that's currently being invoiced, because the picking sheet lets you print a sales order and that's checked to print, even if it's in sales shipping entry. Next, we have a drop box for picking sheets by the ones set to order is how standard Sage 100 prints, which means it prints one pick sheet for each sales order separately. That might not be ideal for the picker because they want to print one pick sheet for multiple sales orders and have those line items sorted. Alternate sort order of the bin locations so that they can pick multiple sales orders at once, but do it in an organized fashion. So there you can do bin items. So for the picking sheets for all of the sales orders, it'll do one pick sheet and sort the lines in bin location order or alternate sort order. You can do bin item or bin item order. Bin item order will print one line for that item. For each sales order, or if you do bin item, it'll do one line for the item for multiple sales orders. And then finally, we have picking sheet auto allocation sort. And so what this does is it chooses the sales order in specific orders. So you may want to do is sales order date or ship expire date and choose the oldest sales orders to auto allocate before printing. And that's it for the advanced options of picking sheet printing. On the main menu of the DSD ScanForce Multibin Advanced, we have some advanced features related to replenishment. On the main menu, there are 4 menu options for replenishment. replenishment entry, put away report, and then the register and update for replenishment. These features are for the advanced version of Multibin. The Multibin Basic does not have access to these menu options. Replenishment selection allows you to do a bulk selection for items that can be moved in bulk from and to bin locations. Once you created the selection, it populates a data entry that you can then view and edit in replenishment entry. You also have the ability of doing replenishment entry without doing a selection first. Once you've created a replenishment entry, you can then run a put away report, and this report will show you sorted by bin location or sorted by the sort order, the bin location that you're going to be putting the items into. This is used by your put away person so they can go through the warehouse and move items from one bin location to multiple bins or from multiple bins to multiple bins. And then finally, when you run the rest for an update, it will do the automatic transfer within the warehouse for those bins. We're going to start with replenishment selection. Now there are different replenishment types. There's put away, restock, and overstock. Put away is when you're moving items from one bin location to multiple bin locations, or it could be from a specific location type to another bin location or other location types. For example, if you do receipt of goods, and instead of receiving them into the assigned bins, you may receive those items into one area. That's the receiving area. And as mentioned before, the purpose of that is to get those items into inventory into the warehouse so that they show that they are on hand. And with this put away replenishment type, we can move those items from the receiving bin or receiving location into the individual bins they are assigned to the items, and it uses the auto allocation rules in warehouse bin maintenance. The next replenishment type is restock. This is an example where let's say you have a warehouse and a storefront and you want to replenish the storefront from the warehouse. And it utilizes a minimum and maximum quantity. For example, let's say you have a convenience store and you have bins that have items in it. There's a maximum quantity to fill up each bin, but there's also a minimum quantity, so you can run the replenishment that it looks at the bins that have fallen below the minimum. Then it will replenish them up to the maximum amount. Finally, we have a replenishment type of overstock. This is where we're moving items from the overstock bin locations for each item and then moving them into the primary bin locations for those items. Let's go back and look at put away. As mentioned earlier in warehouse bin maintenance, under setup, you can define the allocation rules. For each data entry at the bottom, we have replenishment, so you can select auto allocation rules for put away as well as restock. So for put away, I want the auto allocation to take from bin location or the from location type and then move those items into the receiving bins. As mentioned earlier, those are defined in item bin maintenance. Replenishment selection is the normal data entry. So you can select the next replenishment number, which is set up in multi-bin options. You can choose the warehouse. You can choose whether it's from a specific bin location or it's from a specific location type. In my example, we're going to choose a receiving bin to pull up from. Again, these items have been received into the receiving bin from the PO receipted goods, and now I'm putting everything away, and at the bottom selection here, I can define the specific locations I want to put away. Or maybe I want to do a specific bin location range. I can choose item code range and product line range. Here I can select proceed. What it's going to do now is it's going to look at all the items in that receiving bin location and populate a data entry for replenishment. That selection process is complete, and now I can look into replenishment entry to see what the selection created. Here's my replenishment number. You can see it has the replenishment date and the warehouse code. And on the lines, it found 3 items that are going to be moved from the receiving bin location. It's showing me the 2 bin locations based on the auto allocation rules set up in warehouse bin maintenance. For lot serial items, there's a column for the lot serial. At this point, I can change the quantity I want to transfer based on what was selected. I can do a new replenishment entry here, bypassing the selection process. Next, we have the put away report. As mentioned, this put away report will print out what is on the replenishment selection, and it will sort in either alphabetic order or in sort order based on your settings in multi-bin options. Your put away person will use this report to move the items from the from location into the individual bins. Once they've put away those items, you may run the replenishment register, which will move those items in the multi-bin module, and you will see those transactions in either bin location maintenance or item bin maintenance on the transactions tab. That completes the replenishment process. Next up, I'm going to show the multi-bin options in warehouse bin maintenance. And this is where you can define the multi-bin enablement for company, as well as by warehouse. We'll start with multi-bin options. On the main tab, the first checkbox is allow multi-bin distribution. Once you have activated the DSD ScanForce multi-bin module in company maintenance, you can now go to options and then enable it for that company code. We also have allow on-the-fly bin locations so that if you're in data entry and you are assigning a bin location, you can create a new one on the fly. And then we have quick bin transfer. Enabling quick bin transfer allows you to do a quick transfer of an item from one bin to another in bin location maintenance and item bin maintenance. We have a sort method. We have alphabetical and alternate sort. If you choose alternate sort, this is defaulted in warehouse bin maintenance, where you can have a sort order for printing of reports and picking sheets. We have a checkbox that allows for inventory maintenance, where you can drill down directly into the multi-bin module into item bin maintenance. On the entry tab, we have a number of features for both the basic and advanced. The item bin maintenance, we can have the display default to serial number if you use lot serial items. We have the display of the lot serial expiration date, again if you're using serial items. Then we have a default unit of measure display. This allows you to display quantities in different unit of measures, including standard, sales, and purchases. The next selection has to do with distribution. When you're doing distribution to bin locations and you have a lot serial, you can elect to have the entry be either bin location first or lot first. And then the defaulting of auto allocation method can be auto allocate, never auto allocate, or prompt you to auto allocate. Or you can have a button selection, which is where you do not allocate unless you select the button to do so. For the advanced feature, we have replenishment selections. On the top right, we have sales order distribution options, so that when you're doing distributions, it will disable the auto pop-up of the distribution as well as bypassing the prompt you need to ship complete. For sales order distribution, the serial items, you have the ability to allocate at the bin level rather than allocate at the serial number level. For invoice shipping distribution, we have the ability to automatically ship allocated quantities, and we also have auto increment of the bin lot serial. On the printing tab, we have recaps that are available for the registers, so you can enable a register to print per Sage 100 standard, and then when the register is printed, it will prompt you to print a recap by bin location, and then you can select here whether you want to print it in bin location order or if you want to have it in the alternate sort order. For picking sheets, we have some advanced capabilities where you can elect to print a picking sheet by sales order, which is the standard way of printing for Sage 100, or you can print one pick sheet for multiple orders and sort it by bin item. Or if you want more detail, it'll print one line per bin, per item, per order. Again, these are defaults, and then picking sheet printing, you can change the selection. You can allow auto allocation during picking sheet printing for sales orders, so you could not auto allocate to a bin location, but at the time of the picking sheet printing, you can have the system auto allocate to the bins right before it prints the picking sheets. We also have a feature in purchase order receipts of goods to also print the picking sheets automatically. Next, we have warehouse bin maintenance. We're in multi-bin options. We can enable it by company, and warehouse bin maintenance, we can enable multi-bin by warehouse. The first option is allow multi-bin distribution. By selecting this checkbox, you are enabling that warehouse to be multi-bin. You can also define if quick bin transfer is allowed. You can allow for negative quantities for items in the bin locations. You can have the bin location sort method, which is alphabetical, by bin location, or alternate sort. You can select allow on the flag bin locations, and then we have an option to auto allocate single lots in sales order. Next up is the structure of the bin location. As mentioned, warehouse can have different configurations, so you have large warehouses that have different sections and multiple aisles within each section, and then multiple bins in each aisle. You can also have smaller warehouses where it's just aisle and then bin locations, so you being able to define the structure of the bin number based on the size of your warehouse. You have up to 5 segments that make up a bin location. It's sort of like a general ledger account where then you can define segments and then the size of those segments and the separator in between each segment. For this warehouse code, I have 3 segments. I have aisle, I have the rack, and then I have the bin location. I can define the length of each segment, and then I can select the separator in between each segment. In this example, the mask is a 1-3-2 mask. I can also define the range for each segment, and then from here on the right side, I can select a toolbar, and then I can define the segment codes. For example, if for the aisles I only have 30 aisles, I can define aisles 1 through 30. Next up, we're going to look at product line bin maintenance. There's a few things here. One for each product line, you can define whether or not multi-bin is disabled. So if you don't set up any product lines in this panel, then that's fine. It will just assume that all product lines are enabled. Here, I'm going to select this product line for this warehouse. In here, I can either disable multi-bin or just leave it unchecked to leave it enabled. I also have a checkbox to disable auto allocation for that product line. Now, once you set these or any of the default bins, whenever you create a new item code for this product line, it'll automatically use these settings when creating the record in item bin maintenance. So again, item bin maintenance has the same options. You have disable multi-bin, disable auto allocation, and then you have your default bin locations. So again, product line maintenance is really the defaults. So when I create new items, it'll just default the item bin maintenance record from product line maintenance. Next, we have location type maintenance. Location types are areas in your warehouse. It could be a receiving area, it could be a staging or shipping area, or it could be an area that is assigned to certain customers or to certain product lines or the location type. When set up, you can then create restrictions based on that location type. And when you create a new bin location, you can set that bin location to certain location types. So here's the location type here on the bin location. So if you select a location type, then the setting from that location type will automatically be brought into the bin location. Again, so you can set up restrictions. So in my example here, my receiving area, and I want to disallow the user from choosing a bin location. To ship from the receipt, I want to disallow the user from choosing a bin location to ship from for the receiving area. So in other words, receiving is only meant for receiving into. It's not allowed to be used in SO invoices or sales orders, right? So again, when I create the bin locations, I can assign the location type, and this is useful when I'm first setting up multi-bin where I'm auto-creating the bin locations. If it's for a specific location type, it'll default all of these values for me. In this section, we're going to cover the setup of warehouse multi-bin. We're going to create bin locations inside that warehouse, and we're going to talk about the structure of the bin, the smart bin number, as well as all the segments that make up the smart bin. We're going to go ahead and go into warehouse bin maintenance, and we're going to pull up a warehouse that is not currently set up. So I'm going to choose the 98 scrap warehouse, and you'll see that the setting to allow multi-bin distribution is currently disabled. We just went over multi-bin options to enable it for the company, and now we're going to be doing that for the warehouse code itself. When I select this option, it says all items will be transferred to a default bin. The reason for this is that you have the items already in that warehouse, and we need to put them into a default bin location. And from there, you can then transfer those items to the appropriate bin locations that are set up in your warehouse. But for now, it needs to go into a single bin location. If you are using standard stage 100 bin locations where you've defined the bin location in the item warehouse, again in standard stage 100 you have the ability of putting the items in that bin location, and I'll show you that in a moment. But for now, I'm going to go ahead and review the settings for this warehouse. Then we're going to create the smart bin number using the segments. I just enabled multi-bin for this warehouse. You can enable quick bin transfer for this warehouse, where you can transfer items between bins within the warehouse quickly. And you can do that through bin location maintenance and item bin maintenance. We have an option that allows negative bin quantities and for non-lot serial numbers. That means is standard Sage doesn't allow for negative quantities in bins, but we're going to go ahead and allow that. So when you sell an item from a bin that does not have enough quantity, it'll allow it to go negative inside the bin location. We talked about the bin location sort method, whether we use alphabetical or alternate sort. Can allow on-the-fly bin locations during data entry, and then auto-allocate single lots and sales orders. You can have up to 5 segments. You can choose the length of each segment and then a separator in between the segments. The bin location field is 40 characters, so you have up to 40 characters, including the separator. I'm going to do this warehouse is I'm going to define 3 segments, and I can choose the length. Once I've defined the segments, I can then set up the segment values that are allowed for each segment. The first segment I'm going to do is zone. So I have a warehouse for multiple zones, and I have 9 zones, so I'll make 1 character, and then I'm going to do a separator of a dash. So the zones I have in this warehouse are 1 through 9. Then I'm going to do aisle. So each zone has up to 100 aisles, so I'm going to make this with 3 characters, and I'm going to be 001 to 9999. And I'm going to have a dash that separates the second and third segment, and finally I'm going to have a bin location. The bin location inside the aisle, I'm going to make it 2 characters, so I'm going to make it 01 through 99. So when I create the bin locations, it's going to have 1, 3, 2 mask, similar to what you see in general ledger accounts, where you can define segments that make up the general ledger account. We have the same for bin location. What we're going to do is we're going to first create a default bin location. So I'm going to go ahead and do 1000101. That's the default bin location that I'm going to put all items into. What I have to do is first create the description. So I'm going to say bin-001-01. Once I've created this initial bin, I'm able to create more bin locations based on the settings for this one. Right now I'm going to leave everything alone in terms of the location type, the minimum, maximum quantity, and restrictions. I'm just going to click OK. What it's done now is it's created that 1 bin location for this warehouse. I just have that bin location. The next checkbox is important. I mentioned that if you have standard Sage 100 bin locations already assigned for that item warehouse, again, it's not multiple bins, it's just that single bin. You can check this when copied, the quantities into multi-bin. If there is a bin location defined for that item warehouse, it'll create that bin location for you. At this point, I'm going to hit accept. Now that it's done, it has moved all the quantities into the default bin location. But because I choose the standard Sage bin location, it would have moved everything to those bin locations. So I'm going to go back into the warehouse. The next thing I'm going to do is going to add more features to the structure, and then I'm going to be able to create multiple bin locations from an initial bin. So you can select the segment here, and on top right there's a create segment. I'm going to create 1 through 9, and then when I click auto create, you'll see it's automatically created segments 1 through 9. The second segment I'm going to create 001 through 99. So you see it has created 99 segments. That means that I have up to 99 aisles that I can use. And then finally on the last segment, it's 2 characters, and I'm going to do 01 through 99. So now that I have 99 for that same code, from here, if I want to delete a segment, I can select it, and I'm going to hit the X and delete a segment. Now let's show you how this is used when I'm auto-generating bin locations. So this is auto-generate bin locations. What I'm going to do is auto-generate multiple bin locations from 1 bin. The first thing I'm going to do is in multi-bin, I'm going to create a new bin location. It's going to be 100-02. I'm going to create a description for it, and note that I'm putting the bin location as part of the description, and you'll see later when I auto-generate bins, as it creates multiple bins, it's also going to update the description if the bin location is within the description. Here, I can also select a location type. In this case, I'm going to create multiple picking bin locations. Then I'm going to leave the maximum and minimum quantities at 0. I'm also going to add the restrictions. When I select that location type, it auto-populates the data entries that are disallowed for that bin location. This is the bin location I'm going to use to copy from. Let's go ahead and create multiple bin locations. Under Utilities, I'm going to select Auto Generate Bin Locations. I'm going to select my warehouse code, and then I'm going to either create or delete. So you have the ability of deleting a range of bin locations if you set it up correctly. Now I'm going to create some. I'm going to do copy from bin location. Here I'm going to choose the bin location that I just set up. Now I can create multiple bins based on the segments that I've set up in the warehouse bin maintenance. And I'm also going to better define, let's just say I want to do for zone 1. I'm going to click proceed and it's going to prompt me. Do you want to create bin locations based on the inner settings? I'll say yes, and that's going to create, in this case, hundreds of bin locations on my settings. Now it's prompted me that it's already created 1,000 of them, so I'm going to say yes to continue on, or you can say no, I didn't mean to create that many, in which case I would have to delete the bin locations created, then redo the creation process. I'm going to go ahead and say yes here. Now that it's created 2,000 bin locations, for timing purposes, I'm going to say no here. And if we go into the bin location maintenance, we select warehouse 98, and you can see that it's created all of these bin locations. You can see that the settings for each bin location is based off on the from bin location. We have the location type of picking, we have all of those restrictions, and so on. That concludes the auto-generate of bin locations.